Hey everybody, I'm back. Welcome to the next episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. Uh, I'm Brian. I'm your host. That's silly. So, so today's episode, oddly enough, I was feeling particularly uninspired um, earlier this week, and I couldn't figure out because I was really just buried in work stuff and getting things pumped out. It's the end of the month, which means deadlines for most of the time. And because of that, I really was sort of really focused and kind of swamped, and writing an outline for what I wanted to do for my next episode was not on my priority at the moment. And then I got a really cool message from a friend of mine. A he has been a, friend and fan of the work for, geez, probably at least 15, 16, 17 years. He's been around since the initial publication of War Machine. He was one of my first privateer press buddies with that crew. A gentleman by the name of Dave Hartman. Um, we talk once in a while. Normally, we kind of bump into each other at the occasional show. In fact, right behind me, I'm going to see if I can't do this in the camera. I'm kind of poking this little thing here. Boop, boop, boop. This foam skull is anatomically correct human foam skull that my buddy Dave gave me at Gen Con, my 40th birthday. I turned 40 the same weekend that Gen Con turned 50. And he showed up to the convention, which was awesome to see him. But he showed up to the convention and had a mesh bag, like a laundry bag, filled with these foam skulls that I now have up on my Aquaman shrine. Uh, so he gave me this foam skull, and I mean, if you look at it up close, maybe a little bit later in the episode, I'll get it down and let you guys see it. Um, it's ooh, or maybe I'll Easter egg it at the end of the video. See how many of you make it to the end. Either way, um, it's really super well detailed, and it's the right size for someone who has a not gigantic head. It's really cool. And it's made out of really cool foam, and I don't know what he's ever planning on doing with it or whatnot, but he gave me one, and I put it up in my Aquaman shrine, and we'll go from there. But so I digress. Dave wrote to me. I'm actually going to read it to you because it's kind of long. Uh, and there's a particular part of it that is uh, well, I mean, it really kind of landed perfectly for what I was thinking about for this week. Okay, let's see. Get to big wall of text. He was talking about so he's big into role playing, and he was talking about some of the stuff that he was planning on doing for his game and his people. And then he kind of out of the blue he goes, and now I quote, "Not that you've asked for this, nor should you even consider it, but after listening to your latest YouTube post, I struck." It struck me that viewers other than me might be interested in getting some insight into your process for creating game fiction. Maybe I'm the only one who would like it. I hope not. I hope everyone likes it and watches me and subscribes and tells their friend to subscribe and those friends. Maybe I'm the only one who would like it. Maybe that's just too close to giving away your edge. I don't have an edge. We'll get into that. I'm just not right upstairs. That's all for you to determine. Anyway, I've always thought it would be cool to pull together a set of vignettes to give my players an additional lore for my settings. Nothing that they need, but maybe help them understand the world as a whole better. Execution has always stymied me. Then I'm going to add this in there because it's just kind of a nice little tag. He goes, "That's not a plea for help, just food for thought if you're ever looking for a topic." And so, Dave, It wins the topic of the week by Facebooking me and asking kind of where I get my inspiration and, for lack of a better term, my kind of creative juices for all the various stuff that I write and come up with, all the fiction that kind of pours out of my brain. Um, you're gonna get this episode. You're gonna get a little bit of a psychoanalyzation of Mr. Steele, or self psychoanalyzation, self psychotic analyzation. I don't know. Um, I am not a doctor, and a lot of the things that I will say are just opinion or theoretical knowledge based off of what I know inside my own skull, which is a terrifying place to be, by the way. Um, so it's a really good question, and especially it hit, what inspires you hit me on a week where I was not terribly inspired as to a topic for my vlog. So it was, perfect, like, serendipitous. Uh, so before we get into that, let's do my my normal little, take a look at what Bryan's been doing. We're talking about my being inspiration or inspired, and why I wasn't inspired earlier on. It's really just because I've been very focused. I've been trying to get two major projects out the door. Last week's episode, I talked to you about the Dungeon in a Box. Well, I wrapped that up, barring some edits. Went a little long. I did what you're never supposed to do as a writer. If they give you a general word cap, try and stay pretty damn close to it. I got a little long-winded in some places, and we're gonna have to edit some stuff down. I mean, it is what it is. I always have a lot of fun with the arc and with the adventure, and I just didn't want to stop talking. Really, is what it came down to. Didn't want to stop storytelling. So some stuff went a little long. So probably in the next couple of days, I'm gonna have to go in and trim a bunch of stuff out and get that cleaned up. Um, which, uh, it is what it is. It happens. Happens to the best of us. Uh, I'll know better for the next one. The other main project that I've been working on, I think I mentioned it in the last podcast or in the last vlog. I don't know if I mentioned it directly or not, but I've been spending at least a lot of my time in the last most of this week working on a little game called Broken Contract, um, by Breaker Press. I To be completely honest, I did not know this was a game. I had not heard of it until one of the Breaker Press owners, operators, writers, designers reached out to me about a month ago, give or take, little bit before, and had said, hey, if you are going to be swinging past Adepticon up in Chicago, I'm going to be there. Why don't we, chit chat a little bit and see what's up? And he sent me some files. We were taking a look at some things, and he set me up with the main box set and like the player's guide, and contracted me out to do one of his kind of like faction booklets. I think is really kind of what like a how to play a particular faction. And it's neat. It's a neat little game. It has, for the most part, it's D6 and D3 oriented. You use a pretty basic system when it comes to like trying to make checks on stuff. If your guy's got an intelligence of 4 and you want to do something intelligent that requires an intelligence check, roll a die, a regular D6. If you get equal to or greater than that number, you succeed. If you get less than that number, you fail. And with this game, most of the actions that you can take have if you have a critical failure and a critical success kind of thing that can happen, If you roll a 1, it's a critical failure, and then you roll what's called the D-fumble. It's a die that has 3 blank sides and then 3 sides that have a number of exclamation points on it. And the exclamation points, depending on the the thing that you're doing, like so there's a chart inside the book that says, wait, let's say your dude was trying to let's find a good one. Uh, Try to do first aid. He's trying to do first aid on someone else, and he rolls a critical fumble. Then he rolls his die, and if it comes up blank, then it's just a failure. It is what it is. If he had 1 exclamation point showing, basically the guy takes an additional wound. Uh, if he rolls 2, he takes 2 wounds. Rolls 3 exclamation points, he takes 3 wounds. And in this game, it's very narrative. It's extremely your scenarios are short and sweet about I'm trying to get my guy from here to do this thing and maybe back again, or I'm trying to get off the board without the guards rousing the alarm. It reminds me of a less head-to-head gang war style of like a Necromunda, but with fewer models. I would say generally you're probably gonna have maybe 4 or 5 models to a side tops. Um, it's a cool world. It's basically like space miners. No aliens or anything like that. Everybody's human. Everyone came to the colonies to be a miner or be a corporate, a corporate shill, and uh, a bunch of bad stuff happened as you do, and some of the miners are in the middle of like a union revolution. One of the factions is a bunch of guys that are still loyal to the corporation. Um, there's the actual security police, and then there's another faction that's like the smugglers and criminal, like the criminal underground that happens anytime that you've got, people need to get things that maybe their wages won't always cover. But it's a cute game. Like I got to play it at Adepticon. Get to run through a little scenario with one of the guys that runs the company. Um, and it's neat. Small board. Some of the scenarios are on little as a space as like 8 inches by 16 inches. Um, I would say most of the scenarios that I am seeing here are more like 16 by 16. Maybe on the outside you might see a 3 foot by 3 foot. Um, but yeah, it's that's really kind of what I've been wrapping up on right now is basically getting this source book done for Broken Contract. I'm uh, I'm hoping that it goes well. That the owner of the company, that Nick likes what I've come up with and likes what I've written, likes what I've designed. I actually did a little bit of design work in there, so it's not all just fiction, fiction, fiction. Um, I hope that that goes over well and that they dig it when I turn it in later today. So I'm like I said, it's a neat game. Um, I think that it would be perfect for a like if you have a game day, and you got like 8 people over, and you got a board game that's going to take 3 or 4 hours, that's going to take up 6 of them. I think this would be a great side game to be able to do a scenario or two, smash out. Hey, here, let's do these 2 little runs while we're waiting for those guys to be done with their board game, so we can swap everything, so we can switch everything up and play some other stuff. I also think that it's the this Broken Contract game is still really it's really young. At this point, there's really just a starter box, like a deck of cards, like add-on narrative cards. And I think the player's kit are like the only products that are actually out for you. So it's still real new, and has a lot of room to grow. Right now, there's really only 4 factions, and like three and a half kinds of models you can put in each kind of faction. Um, and then you can alter them from there as far as like what skills they have, what equipment they have. Um, so there's a lot of room to grow. I think that it could definitely get bigger and better. Um, the system, like I said, the system is pretty cool. The tables you have to have handy because each one has the critical successes and the critical failures for the various actions. But most of the stuff that you would need for playing the game are going to be on like your stat cards and things that you'll have in front of you for your dashboards for your characters. Um, but it's neat. And I think that if you get a chance, especially if you are at a show that these guys are at, do a demo. If you aren't and you don't mind, I honestly don't know the retail value of the starter box, but it comes with like 6 or 8 metal figures that match the NPC characters that are in the box to kind of get you started. It comes with some game tiles. It's cool. I think that it's the kind of thing that I might show. I might show some of my other friends when I've gotten a little more input, a little more into it. I'll probably hype it up a little bit more. But right now, it's just a solid little game that I think could become much bigger, and I don't and I'm happy to be part of that growth if possible. Um, so again, Breaker Press, Broken Contract, Hammer Press. What did I say? It is Breaker Press. Yeah, okay. I was confused. I got a couple other irons in the fire working on a novella. Starting to slam out some words for the Shadowrun novella. Um, they just announced in the last like 48 hours, Catalyst made that announcement that they are coming out with a sixth world, the sixth edition of Shadowrun of the role playing game. I've known that for a little while now because I am helping with at least one of those initial kind of, I don't know if it's in the launch, but it's like the first wave of products for sixth ed. So um, I'm excited about that. I'm talking to Jason Hardy. He's the Shadowrun lead, the guy who kind of runs that section of Catalyst. I'm talking with him right now to see if I can't get my hands on uh, some of the review materials. Maybe here pretty soon, I'll be able to do like a quick rundown review of the game. I might not. I know right now I can't talk about the specifics of what I'm doing in it, but maybe down the road I'll be able to, and maybe down the road I'll be able to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek of the various cool things that are happening, and it is cool. And I know there's a lot of people on Facebook and on some of the game threads and things like that that are freaking out because it's a new edition, and that's what we do as gamers. Change, no. I get it. I get it. We all have we all have those certain editions of certain games that threw us so far for a loop, or were so different, or didn't match to our feeling that we fell out of the game for a long time. In the case of me, I I didn't play Warhammer 40K for probably 5 6 years, maybe 7, because of I want to say third or fourth edition. I don't remember which edition it was, but I really didn't like it. It felt wrong. I did not like the way the vehicles were handled. It really just didn't speak to me like the game before did, and then the game again has since when it changed to new editions. I had sold off a bunch of my armies, like it was a big deal. D&D Fourth Edition was very similar for me. I thought the system was good. It was a solid system, just not for D&D. It just had like kind of the wrong feel for what I wanted out of my Dungeons and Dragons. Um, which is weird to say because honestly, if it really comes down to it, a good DM and a good player can skin just about any system to fit your narrative, unless unless it's just off. Like you're using a fantasy system to try and play Cyberpunk. Like I get that, but when it comes to if it's a system that plays fantasy and you've got a fantasy IP, then it should work out. It should match up with a little bit of work. There was just something about fourth ed D&D that did not ring for me, which also went in line with the Star Wars role playing game, the Saga edition, which was very very similar in tone and style and mechanics as D&D 4. Um, there are some editions of other things that I have never been all that keen on. Um, but I also know that from a business set standpoint, you know, as a gamer, I wish all of my books were good forever, and that the realism, I know we always say this as gamers. As soon as someone puts out a new edition and you're like, oh my god, I've got $2,000 worth of the last edition, I'm not buying another one, we'll just keep playing the old version. A lot of us say that, but I would say about 75% of the people who say that never follow through, because it is really hard to play an old game that there is newer stuff out for. There is new story. There are new monsters. There are new game game books. There's new gaming aids. There's this new widget that you can use in this thing, but it wouldn't work with the old game because they didn't use widgets. There's a lot of that, and I know I'm super guilty of it. I'll if a game shifts and suddenly I'm like, I don't like the new edition. And so could I play an old one? Absolutely. Absolutely. I just know that, there's that little voice in the back of my head that's like, nah, just wait for it to come back around and get redesigned for a way that you like it. Or there's all those other games on your shelf that you haven't played that are current and fully supported by the company. Let's play those. And to a lesser degree, a lot of us gamers, especially gamers that do play kind of a broad spectrum of things, we're fickle. We'll focus on one thing for a little while and be like, this is awesome, this is awesome, this is awesome, and then something else will come up and be like, oh my god, we have entertainment ADD, where we're just like, this is the next coolest thing that has been put right in front of my face. Yay! And then 2 weeks later, something else pops in front of our face. Yay! It's one of the reasons why I think as we get older as gamers, and as we get in a situation where we have more liquid resources and we have more money, less free time, we gather all these things kind of for that new car smell, to paraphrase, or to make a metaphor, is it's cool, it's awesome, it's new, I want it, I can have it, I'll play it eventually. And I honestly, I think that's a big thing with Kickstarter. Is a lot of people will be like, oh my god, that's the coolest thing ever, I want in on this. And I know I'm guilty of it. I've got stuff in my closet that came off of a Kickstarter that I've never touched, that are still in plastic wrap, because it was awesome. I knew it. I wanted it. I wanted to be in on this cool thing because my gamer synapses were firing and were like, oh my god, I must have. And then I have. And because between saying I must have that product and then moving to having that product, there's been a bunch of little steps in between. I'll get around to it. I'll keep telling myself that. It's also one of the reasons why I think, especially in role-playing groups, you hear a lot of times where someone will be like, I've played the same game for 7 years, 10 years, whatever. And then when you ask them, more often than not, there's been huge hiatus chunks in there because people get busy. Very rarely do you hear someone say, yeah, we've played the same D&D game for 12 years, twice a month. Every other Friday we play like clockwork, no matter what. I mean, if you have that kind of ability and you have that kind of structure and that kind of wherewithal to be able to keep your schedule open like that, man, I'm jealous. Because let's say at last count, I have a Star Wars D20 game that I haven't ran in months. That was a lot of fun. I am part of a Star Trek game that plays online. Uh, I've got one, two, three, four D&D games, either that I'm running or playing in. One Vampire 5th Edition, um, and there's always more lurking, waiting to happen, and I'm sure I'm forgetting at least. Oh, a Starfinder game my buddy's running. Now Shadowrun's we closed out one of our Shadowrun games to start up a new one, and then now that the announcement has been made for Sixth Ed, and that I'll have access to those files, and most of the people in the one of these groups that was starting up are my playtesters, um, that are all under NDA and whatnot. That maybe we'll use that to launch his new game. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff happening, always. And sometimes, it gets a little overwhelming, and occasionally you just got to take a step back and take a deep breath. But overall, we have all these options. We have all these options, and not enough time or money or brain cells to make them all happen. And where did I start with this? Why did I go on this weird tangent? This is about inspiration. This video is supposed to be about what inspires me, not what takes up all my brain power. We were talking about Broken Contract. No, I had that be a really fun side game. Okay. And then we started talking about the Shadowrun novellas and stuff. Okay, now I get it. All right. So yeah, that's basically what I'm working on. Meaning that when I turn in the Broken Contract stuff and start smashing out the novella and the Sixth World stuff, I'm hoping to hear back from a company that we've been kind of playing phone tag or email tag, about a really, 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 really cool thing that I am pretty sure that I sold him on, and I want to go deeper on it, but uh, I don't have the time. This is going to sound super elitist. I don't have the time to waste on it when I need to be doing things that are paying me. If that makes any sense, because I got to pay my bills. But I really, 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 really want them to get back to me so we can kind of push go on that project, because I am so psyched. I am so excited to be able to put words down on this project, but I can't do it for free right now. I need to make this into a project, because I got other things that are on my plate that are paying gigs that have to take my focus. All right. So now all of that's aside, let's talk about what Dave wanted me to talk about initially, and that is, how do I keep my inspiration and my creative flow, with all these different ideas and all these different, games and worlds and settings and arcs and characters and all this stuff. And I think it all stems back actually to my childhood. Um, I know that sounds kind of cliche, but I have always been a crazy spaz. When it comes to when I was a tiny little kid, I looked like Macaulay Culkin when I was little. If I, oh, I do I have a, you know what? If I find a good picture of when I was little, I will Easter egg that at the end of the episode too. See if you guys make it. Um, so I was a crazy kid. I was super into cartoons, crazy into comic books, still am, obviously. Um, but the big thing that I always did, and it comes from honestly the support from my now deceased uncle. Patrick, Uncle Pat, was uh, was really one of the primary driving forces in um, making me love fiction and storytelling as much as I do. Um, we're sharing. This is my vlog. I can do this. I can tell you about stuff. So my parents got divorced when I was really young. I was six or seven, I think. And my father um, ended up moving away for work, and by away I mean like halfway across the country, which means that we talked on the phone and we didn't see him very much, but so it was there was a lot of distance there. And growing up through a lot of my years, my stepfather, John, filled a lot of the a lot of the parenting roles that I needed, obviously. And who's an amazing man, still is to this day. Him and my mom, they take amazing care of everyone around them, myself included. Um, but the while I was growing up, he was always there to help out with family stuff. But it was my Uncle Pat that really did focus my attention on uh, having fun in life. Uncle Pat had he grew up out in the country with my grandparents. He went into the military at a relatively early age. Um, I mean, I guess everyone did at that time. So he was in the army. He was a military police while he was there. He got into a car accident and broke out almost all of his teeth, requiring him to have dentures extremely young. I'm positive that he never had his teeth while I was alive. He had dentures well before I was born. Um, and he was very big into, he read novels, which is one thing that my parents, my father, the one that moved out to Denver, he was big into novels. So that was always kind of cool to whenever we got to visit, I got to see his like library wall. But my mom and my stepdad John, they never really got into that kind of reading. Like I never saw them, magazine here and there, the newspaper or whatnot. But like just seeing my mom sit down and crack open a book would be alien to me. Like I didn't grow up that way. I learned I learned to read stories through Uncle Pat and my older sister Angela. Um, my sister and I, we would chew through Stephen King novels like crazy. Eyes of the Dragon, best novel there is. Um, it it was a thing. We would go on road trips and we would take two or three novels with us and just the early Dragonlance novels. I devoured those. But Uncle Pat always had a book by his couch, the side of the side of his end table, and he was the one that taught me that watching movies and watching TV shows and kind of eating these stories is um, is a way to stay mentally young, living through these other worlds and setting aside all of the hellacious stuff that happens to us and diving into their world, um, if only for just a couple hours, was why was really he kind of taught me how to escape from hard stuff, from escape or from stress, when I didn't even know what stress was. And he also so Uncle Pat was married once. It did not last long. I remember I have home videos that show his wife, but I don't remember her. And then he had a longtime girlfriend for a while, who is an amazing person. Um, she came to his funeral. Now he's been dead now for 10 years, I think. Well, no, it'd be more than that. Probably 11 or 12. One of my biggest regrets, and I can't say regret, one of my biggest kind of downer moments is that my uncle never got to meet my son. Um, yeah, all right. So we'll get off this depressing stuff. Um, but Uncle Pat was, because he never had children and he was kind of the consummate bachelor. He's the one that taught us how to have fun. He's the one that taught me uh, just about everything that a teenage boy should or should not know. Um, he showed me my first R-rated movie. He was the one that explained to me that, he was never a big fan of horror movies. But we watched a lot of action movies and a lot of just grisly, stuff, like some sci-fi, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of war movies, a lot of movies like Death Wish and things like that. He was big into that kind of stuff. Um, he was never big into horror movies, but if I wanted to watch one, he would, sit on the couch and watch his, or read his most recent, Mac Bolan book, and I, I would devour whatever TV I wasn't supposed to watch at my mom's house. That Uncle Pat would be like, "All right, as long as you don't tell nobody." Um, but it was through him. He, because he had no kids, we were his kids. My sister and I were effectively his children, and he made sure that we stayed kids in our brains and in our hearts for as long as we could, because he was, all the way up until his dying breath, he was a child. He was the eternal kid, the eternal, always playing pranks. Even in those last couple of years where the he passed away he died of cancer, specifically of the sinuses, and it caused a lot of like brain acuity issues. And those last few months, he kind of reverted back to a childhood again. And now I can look back at this and smile and realize that I'm sure he was probably hurting for a long time, but he went out the way he wanted to, and that has always been, he is and will always be the Peter Pan that I aspire to be. That I wish that I can fill those shoes. That I keep my kids happy and smiling and playing and imagining for as long as possible. So okay, Uncle Pat. So his Uncle Pat got me into reading stories and watching movies and things, and he sparked this kind of creative juices in my brain, and they never went away. I know I hear a lot of people talk about how, as they grow up, I used to draw pictures, but then I got this job, or I used to write stories when I was little, and now I ain't just got time for that. Well, that has never been my issue. Is growing up through junior high and high school, and even some of college, I always I've always had my imagination has always been cranked up to 13. Um, Sometimes to my detriment. Uh, it has quite a bit of a negative effect on me sometimes, where I'll get an idea stuck in my head that is slightly realistic, um, and I'll spin and it'll bounce around. It hits me pretty bad professionally when I start to imagine myself into panic attacks. I don't really have full-on panic attacks, but I have freakouts. I have my moments. And to give you an idea where something like this would happen is, let's say my wife is taking a drive to the store, and she's on her way to the store, and I go to call her, and she doesn't answer her phone. All right, first time, probably not a big deal. Maybe she's got the radio on too loud or whatever. And then maybe a minute later, I'll hear like a police siren outside, totally unrelated. She's probably miles away by now. But there will be a little thing that sparks in my head that says, hey, she's not answering you because she can't answer you. She can't answer you because she got into a car wreck. And she got into a car wreck, and that's where that car is headed to right now, is to go, they're reporting to that right now. And then, of course, that makes me grab my phone again, just to make sure that I'm being stupid, and I'll call again. And if she picks up, then I breathe easy and everything's okay, you're fine. If she doesn't pick up, then it adds to that. And now it's, oh, maybe I should get in the car. Maybe I should go. Where was she going? Maybe I can't, And we call it, my family and we call it spiraling. I'm real bad at spiraling. And that comes from my imagination. It comes from the fact that it's always firing. I'm always thinking. I'm always coming up with weird stuff on the fly. And the drawback has always been that I don't sleep real well. I sleep hard and fast. My wife hates it. I will lay down on the pillow and go, blink, blink, time for bed, and I'm out. I will probably get up 6 or 7 times that night. I do a lot of rolling because my brain never really stops moving. It never really stops going and doing stuff. And some of those times there's been times where I've woken up in the middle of the night because it's more often than not, I have really very vivid dreams. And sometimes those dreams will be so interesting and so unique and so creatively, like there's something that happens and I go, oh, I gotta write that down. I gotta write before the sleep fog fades and I don't have it. And so I will grab my phone and I'll type real quick the like real just baseline notes or something. And there's been times where I've gone back the next day and opened up my phone and looked at my memo bar and go, elephant circus bagel. What? Because it was nonsense and it was gibberish and I have no idea what I was talking about. But then there's other times where, for instance, if you are one of my subscribers or one of the watchers or a viewer that is a fan of Dark Age, one of the arcs about specifically the core, these machines that ran on meat in that game, part of that sprang from a half awake fever dream. Basically, I woke up in the middle of the night with the idea of these, robots tearing things apart, but then actually using the caloric content in human body mass to fuel their batteries. And that was what I typed into my phone real quick before I fell like asleep. And it turned into a much larger entity. It was one of the biggest factions in Dark Age and very popular, still is. And that came from me waking up in the middle of the night because of a nightmare that I was having about robots peeling off my flesh and using it for batteries. So initial inspiration and creativity has never been my issue. Coherent inspiration and creativity is a different animal altogether. So I mentioned earlier that I used to read a lot, but I still read a ton of comics, and I read the occasional novel and short stories. I write a lot, obviously, but it is really the new media, the new media type that has helped me the most in keeping my my ideas and everything flowing is our streaming services like Hulu and Netflix and HBO Go, and all hail the DC Universe app. Um, these things, and the soon to be Disney Plus. Um, these things that basically put countless hours of uh, visual and audio media at my fingertips, where I can cue in and go, I'm working today. I'm working on a post-apocalyptic, a set of scenarios for a post-apocalyptic game. All right, I can hop on Google real quick and go post-apocalyptic movies, and it'll give you a bunch. And a lot of times it's wrong, but sometimes it'll give you, here are the ten best or whatever. And I will try and find two or three of those on these various streaming services, and have that running in the background. And over the last 15 years or so, I've learned that I work better. I write better. I design better. Um, to a certain degree, I paint better if I've got something playing in the background. More often than not, it can't be something that I have to actually watch, because although I can type without looking, I generally like to look at what I'm, sort of looking at the screen, looking at the words coming across the way, because sometimes the keyboard malfunctions, sometimes, I miss a key, there's stuff that I want to be able to see. So I try to stay away from like foreign films that are subtitled, um, very visually stunning movies that might make me kind of draw away from what I'm working on. But it's one of the reasons why I often have three screens going in my studio. One that I'm working on, one that's got like resource files, and then one that's playing, whether it's my laptop or something that's playing, movies on loop, because that keeps my brain moving, and it means that unless I'm really, 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 really in need of, oh my God, don't think about anything else but the project that you're on, um, I tend to have stuff rolling in the background. And I watch a lot of TV with my kids, go to movies. I go to movies. I talk movies a lot. If you follow me on Facebook, or if you are a member of the movie review group that I frequently visit, Adventures in Videoland, on Facebook and stuff. Plug, 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 plug. Um, we talk a lot about movies. We dissect them. We yell at each other about them. We get ticked off at one another. We share memes. It's crazy. It's nutty over there. But one of the things that it does is it means that I consume stories, and more than anything, I think, uh, a while back, one of my writer buddies had said, you know, he had asked like what was the last novel that I had, completely chewed through, and I don't remember what it was. I think it was like World War Z or something. And I told him, and he was like, "Man, that's been out for a while." And I was like, "Yeah, it's been a couple of years since I've read one." And he was astonished that I hadn't read another like novel cover to cover in that time, and was like, "Well, how can you be a writer and not read?" And I'm like, "Well, I do, just not as often, and more often it's in smaller chunks." Um, but some of that is because uh, I think I'm gonna sound all new agey. Uh, Mass media and some of the like straight to streaming or straight to DVD, movies that are out there. Those are the short stories and the novels that I'm consuming. I'm just consuming them while I'm working, while I'm doing other things. And all of these little plot devices, little characterizations, little flaws, little oh, I really love this dude's costume, or that guy's makeup in this movie is phenomenal. And I think all of that stuff, all of those ideas, all of those concepts, all of those dialogue hiccups, and that this style of exchange and whatnot, they all get smooshed into the the mental blender that sits on top of my neck. And gets spun up and churned out into this sort of you know idea paste, idea paste, Kickstarter, that I use to basically glue all my ideas together, all my various plot lines and things. And I would say that hopefully, when I borrow, a point of inspiration or a little bit of this from here and a little bit of that from there, that when I do that sort of thing, that it all comes together in a new and fancy and awesome way, and not just, oh, I'm regurgitating someone else's ideas, because I'm against that too. I'm super okay with homage. I'm super okay with being inspired by other people's stuff, but just to basically take someone else's stuff, chew it up, and go, here's the same thing again. Nah, it's not okay. Yeah, it's not plagiarism, but I mean, it's plagiarism of the soul. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Is how I stay inspired is I consume other people's creations, whether it's their game books or the movies or comics or basically I try and celebrate other creatives and eat and consume their creations to help fuel my imagination and my inspiration. And I know that probably won't work for everybody. I know that sometimes you never know where inspiration and stuff like that comes from. Yeah, it's easy for me to say, throw on Netflix and just listen for 3 days and go, okay, yeah, now I've got this cool idea for a plot. It's not like that. It's just all kind of a jumble. And if you are a budding writer or creator, that you will want to create some arcs and you want to create some stories and things, when you see something or hear something or read something that is particularly inspiring, or you go, oh my God, that fits this character I have in my head perfectly. Uh, because we are adults and because our lives can be so sporadic and weird, write it down. My phone is my notepad, but I also have a pen and paper in the glove box of my car just in case my phone's dead. I've got note cards everywhere on my desk. There's a memo pad, and if I'm deep enough in a project that's got enough arcs and things, there's even more scattered. What I say, and maybe it's just because I'm so scatterbrained and I go off on these little mental tangents all the time, but what I would say is, if you think something's inspiring you, or if you really think something is so cool that it hit you in a way that you hope it will hit your audience, your potential consumers of your product, of your plot line or arc or game session or whatever, write it down, because you might need to polish it up and make it your own, and figure out a way to kind of make it fit into your world or your setting or your story. But if you can, and you can have that same sort of feeling spark in someone else, then you've succeeded. And that's the whole purpose we do this. That we do what we do is, we don't make games and tell stories and things just because we feel we have to. We don't create these characters because we want them to be forgotten. We want people to remember them. We want people to go into it looking at it later and go, I love this guy. I want to know more about them. And who knows where some of this stuff comes from, especially if you consume enough that it's just, a fractal up here in your skull, the end result is hopefully the same. And you come up with these cool things. Or I hope that people think that the stuff I've come up with is cool. And I believe wholeheartedly that you're not stealing. You're not. I mean, you can, but hopefully you're not, and that it will help you realize your own potential and your own kind of see the flags pop up on your own projects if you see something that might spark that for you. And then you just got to try and keep all that stuff straight, whether it's file folders or note cards, or I've got a big metal rack thing that's got all my various games that I'm working on, all in places. This is how I keep things straight. Um, Obviously, try and keep good records. Create pages that say, here are all of my characters that I've made, so you don't end up naming the same guy twice. Or going back and I'm going to introduce this cool sheriff guy that's got, he's missing two fingers on one hand and he's got a glass eye. And then 10 years down the road, you tell a story for a different company that you think it'd be cool to have a sheriff with a glass eye and a weird messed up hand. Someone is probably going to notice that and go, didn't Bryan already write about Weird Gimpy Sheriff? I think he did. Gimpy Cyclops Sheriff has already been done. And then you're gonna run into, especially in the internet age, you're gonna run into problems with people who are questioning just how creative you are, or you regurgitating the same of your own stories again and again and again. But yeah, so I think that's about it. Is really kind of what I wanted to say. Hopefully, Dave, if you're listening and you watched this, that you got the answer to the question you were looking for, and hope everybody else got filled in the way that they wanted to. I don't know. If all goes well, I will have a really cool topic for next week. But I've got a couple of things that I need to iron out first. I kind of vague booked it on my Facebook earlier this week, and people were like, "That's awesome. Is it a job related?" And I was like, maybe, kind of. I don't know. I'm about halfway through the process to hopefully be doing something really cool later this year. And if everything comes together, and hopefully I can tell you about it next week, I hope all of you guys will be screaming it to the rafters and spreading the word, because we could really do some cool stuff with it. So, again, I hope this was a good episode. I know I rambled a little bit, got a little weird about my family history, and got into the wackiness. I'll post up the links to Broken Contract and Breaker Press and the Shadowrun stuff in the description below. As always, make sure you subscribe, make sure you spread the word, get other people to do so as well. Want to talk to as many people as possible. If you have any cool comments, say so. If you've got other topics that you think you might want me to cover or talk about, or probably tangent away from for at least half an hour out of the hour that I spent here, put it in the comments, or hit me up on Facebook, that kind of thing. Other than that, let's go play some games.